City of Quincy marking its 400th anniversary as a settlement here in the year 2025, and it's kicking off with a brand new exhibit in the museum at Old Town Hall called A Better Quincy Would Rise. Quincy Mayor Thomas Koch is joining us to give us a little overview about this exhibit and about what's planned for the rest of this year. Mayor, thanks for joining us. Happy New Year.
My pleasure. Happy New Year once again, Joe.
Here we are in the beautiful museum exhibit space. The museum itself has been here for a while now, right?
It has. This was created as part of the renovations we did to Old Town Hall, gosh, a number of years ago now. How quickly time goes. In fact, we had to replace the boiler already.
Oh, is that right?
My God, nothing lasts like it used to.
Yes.
But when we took a good look at the design of the building at the time, we felt we should have this kind of a space in the building. This is 1844 Quincy Granite, Solomon Willard. I think it was the third town hall for the city, but it continues to be the center of government for Quincy. I believe it's arguably the oldest, longest serving masonry city hall in the country.
Wow.
That's what I'm told, and I'm sticking to that story.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful space. Bob Damon, who I know you're going to be talking to very soon, is a great historian, does great work, and we asked him to put something together for this room, and he blew me away. He did a fantastic job. Made sense. Take the 300th, what happened at the 300th anniversary, which was remarkable. I mean, there were thousands involved in that whole effort. I think it was all done in 141 days.
Yes.
Huge pageant and pageant field. They actually built roads and railroads up there, reenactment of very significant special events in the course of our history. The granite ball was given to the city at the same time. So it's pretty cool. I think they did all the planning and everything was done like in 140 or 41 days at the time. And I believe Pageant Field got its name from that pageant being held there up at Marymount Park. So really cool space.
Yeah, it was a week-long party basically in June of that year, right, 1925.
Yeah. Sounds like I didn't read anything different. Sounds like they had good weather for it, because that can be a killer.
This is true.
Especially a pageant outside. It's one thing to reschedule a parade, but having all-day pageants, all the costumes and the work that went into it's remarkable. But it shows, and I think to a very extent, it was a different society today, but 100 years later, we still have that real fondness for our city, for our community. This is home. People appreciate the history, love the history of the city, for a lot of different reasons, but so I think there's some similarities between the 100 years, and that's love for the community.
And this exhibit is kind of meant as a prelude to what's going to be, I guess, a year-long series of activities, right?
Yeah, they focused on, as you mentioned, they focused really on a week or 10 days. We're focused really in the entire year. And I know we've talked a little bit about it, but we're looking at lecture series, symposiums, special events, entertainment, big parade, July, the June 14th is the Flag Day Parade. We've decided rather than create another parade, let's take what we already have built in and expand it, make it bigger, start it earlier. So that's the plan for the June 14th. We're going to do a second set of fireworks this year in honor of the event. So a lot of things are going to be happening. We've talked about, I know, the Heritage Tree Program. We have the signs throughout the city and the President's Trail. We're going to add to that in a different theme, acknowledging a number of historic places around the city and tell that story a little bit. I was in Philadelphia a number of years ago, and I was amazed at the amount of signage around the city. For example, we ate at an Italian restaurant, and the sign out front of the Italian restaurant, I forget the name of it, but so this is the oldest, longest running Italian restaurant in the country. Now, I don't know who's going to argue that or try to figure that out, but it's kind of cool. I'm not saying we're going to that extent, but we are going to acknowledge a number of significant architectural features that we have, structures in the city, as well as other historical places.
What is it that you'd kind of like folks to take away from the Quincy 400 plans? What is it that you kind of want them to know about Quincy going forward?
Well, a prelude to that is, as we've talked about, during my tenure, we've been through a lot. My first 2 terms was the financial meltdown in the world, through that fiscal crisis. I did the worst flooding, we did the worst snow, we have had COVID. And not that I don't enjoy every day, and I do, but as a community, let's have some fun. Let's enjoy this. This is our history. This is who we are. So let's enjoy it. Out of that, I think that people will take, what their special love is out of it. I mean, if we're having a special author in, perhaps people that love those books. Perhaps it's entertainment and whoever's going to be playing at the stadium. At the end of the day, though, it's a combination of all those events saying, wow, this is who we are, this is where we came from. We should be so proud of this city. That's, to me, that's what it's all about.
It's one of the oldest communities in Massachusetts, obviously. Are other communities being invited to take part in some of the activities?
Yeah, the invitations will be going out, obviously to statewide officials, constitutional officers, any way they can. We'll send an invitation to the president. I doubt we'll see him in Massachusetts, but no, this isn't about just us doing our little thing.
Right.
We played a huge role in the creation of this country, this community. I think it was Dr. Kirk Graham recently said to me, at the time of the Revolution, Boston was the cultural center, but Quincy was the intellectual center. When you think about that, Adams writing the state constitution, his law office, it's a very well way to put it. So though, Lexington Congan had the first battle, the sexy part of it, Quincy was very much part of all the decision making that led up to the creation of this country, and we should appreciate that and enjoy it. Now, I know I've had my discussions with the former mayor of Braintree, who continues to claim we're part of Braintree. We were for a period, and he's trying to shake off the 1625 date. I said, Joe, we were a settlement, Mount Wollaston, before Braintree was even thought about. So this is about the settlement, that first time that the European settlers looked at this area, stopped by and checked it out. And as we know, we've got a great history with our tribes prior to that. The Massachusetts tribe, the Pauncett Band. So there's a lot of history. We're working them in, as you know, with it as well. There's so much to talk about and celebrate. Well, Dunkin' Donuts and Howard Johnson's and all those other commercial aspects that come out of Quincy, Ruth Gordon and Lee Remick, some of the famous actresses, famous authors. I could go on, famous generals, city presidents. It's just so much to have fun with. We don't have to make anything up. I know over the years, congressmen go to Congress and the federal government and try to pick something out to get the National Park Service, hooked into the community for some crazy thought or idea. Well, this stuff there's nothing made up here. It's all the real deal.
Right.
It's who we are, and I think that what Jim Sheets said to me, a former mayor of Quincy, when Hancock Adams Commons was finished, he said, that is a very visible reminder of who we are. And I thought that was a very, very well said statement, because I didn't think of it in that respect. We were creating that beautiful open space, but it really tells us visibly our history and who we are. And so I appreciate that comment by him at the time. But there's so many pieces to the city, whether you talk about recreational opportunities, there's people that love the waterfront, live on the waterfront. Boating and fishing is their thing.
Yep.
So hopefully there'll be enough for everybody to kind of latch on to, participate in, and enjoy.
Well, we look forward to enjoying it with you throughout the year. Happy New Year, Mayor. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Joe.
Very welcome.
As always.
Now, Bob Damon is joining us here in the new exhibit at Old Town Hall called A Better Quincy Would Rise, marking the 300th anniversary of Quincy back in 1625 to 1925. And Bob, it's quite a display that we have here as we're kicking off Quincy 400 here in 2025. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here in the city.
So I am officially the city's Director of Historic and Heritage Resources. What that means is that I work primarily on behalf of the city, caring for and preserving historic resources that are owned by the city of Quincy. And then I also do a lot of work in the public history space as well. So everything from programming and tours to working with local Quincy students, and also obviously working with all the great historical organizations that here in the city that provide all kinds of historical experiences for local folks as well as for our large tourism population.
Sure. Now, as I mentioned, this exhibit is kind of a prelude to what's to come in 2025 to mark the Quincy 400th anniversary as a settlement, right? What does that mean? So
2025 is not when we can say that officially a community was incorporated here. The anniversary is something which actually originated, as far as we know, at least in my conversations with Dr. Ed Fitzgerald from the Historical Society. 1925 was sort of really officially ordained as Quincy's origin date during the celebrations 100 years ago. And it is the first documented settlement that we know of in the Marymount neighborhood, and goes back to the story of the infamous Thomas Morton.
Yes.
And his maypole and his settlement / trading post that was in that area of Quincy at the time.
Okay. So talk about the research that was involved to put this particular exhibit together, reaching back 100 years. Where did this material come from? Who did you interview? Who did you, tap to get all this information before it even came to life here?
Well, like Quincy itself, the community has a number of really wonderful resources that provide these kinds of materials. These stories come from, they're primarily visual here in this exhibit, and that's thanks to some documentation that was done at the time of the actual celebrations, but also came from a man named Parker. And he was a building inspector and an engineer here in the city of Quincy, and he was an avid photographer.
Oh.
And for well over 3 decades, he, we might even say compulsively, was taking images of Quincy.
Okay.
And his collections are held by the Thomas Crane Library.
I see.
Many of them out and accessible for the general public. And most of the photos that you see here come from his collections.
Oh, okay, very good. Curious about the title of the exhibit, Bob. A Better Quincy Would Rise. So talk about that.
Okay, so that comes from a man named Timothy Collins. Mr. Collins was retired at the time, but he had been a newspaperman for 20 years. And he was the local Quincy reporter for the Boston Globe.
Okay.
He was also a member of the organizing committee and worked both on publicity and on the historic programs committee for the tercentenary celebrations. And he wrote the official chronicle of the events of Quincy's 300th anniversary. So from literally the first meeting in January 2025 to the publishing of the official history book known as 300 Years of Quincy, and included his chronicle. He documented every single thing that happened in the 300th anniversary celebrations.
Okay, so he came up with the title.
So that particular piece came from a sentence that was part of his close, a sort of dramatic closing of his piece. And I should have the full sentence memorized. But the idea was that the people of Quincy, were hoping or knew that a new Quincy would rise, a better Quincy would rise out of the collective celebrations, community celebrations of the 300th anniversary.
I see, okay.
So the phrase is really meant to kind of capture what Mr. Collins saw as the larger spirit behind the organization and the events itself.
Okay, so is there a similar kind of, theme or larger spirit for Quincy 400 this year?
I would say that there is,
Okay.
and I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Okay.
In terms of allowing the mayor to really present that spirit
Okay.
and a lot of those pieces out there.
Okay.
Again, we're here with a prelude to what that chapter is going to be for here in 2025.
Right, so talk about this exhibit specifically. What will folks find when they come here?
So this exhibit is really meant to give folks a quick introduction to what life and the landscape of Quincy was like in 2025.
1925.
It's 1925, excuse me. And it includes the color palette that's here.
Yeah.
So many of the colors that people will see as they come to the exhibit are the kinds of colors that were used by commercial operations in the 1920s here in Massachusetts. So both visually and in terms of some aesthetics and colors, a little trip back, 100 years.
Yes.
And then this is really telling the story of the celebrations that happened from June 7th to June 13th in 1925.
Apparently it was quite a blowout.
It was quite a blowout and quite a community effort. And it's happening in the context of a time where, if you had a telephone, your extension had 4 numbers and included something like Granite. So you could be Granite 236. The vast majority of people didn't own an automobile still, although the Roaring '20s were the birth of the commercial automobile industry here in the United States. Sure. Most people were riding on a railway car or riding on the train. And there were only silent films, so there weren't even talkies yet. So the things that happened here are a real reflection of the fact that community life and entertainment and all of the kinds of interactions with it that we know today most of that wasn't around. And so in many ways, kind of like, kids do sometimes, a lot of times, the community came together to make its own entertainment for that week.
So the exhibit, is it laid out in a chronological order for the Quincy 300 that took place?
It's sort of it's kind of more of a narrative story,
Oh,
a
okay.
little introduction to 100 years ago, a little bit about the organization that happened, and then you move into some of the big deal events
Yes.
that were happening at the time.
So, and we're going to highlight, I guess, 3 of them today: the pageant, right?
Yep.
The parade, and then the gifting of one of the granite balls to the city.
Yes.
All right. So
Yeah,
let's take a tour.
Sounds good. Let's go.
So, Bob, what are we standing in front of now?
Okay, so this is one of the main pieces of promotional art for the celebrations in 1925. This poster was created by a well-known commercial artist in Boston. His name was Charles Capon. And this poster would be sent out, according to the Patriot Ledger, or an article in the Patriot Ledger, within 60 miles of Quincy. They sent these posters out to be hung up in local stores, restaurants, things like that, as a way of advertising and marketing the celebrations in June of 1925. I keep saying 2025, goodness.
And it talks about Quincy pageants.
Yes, so pageants were a big deal in the 19-teens and 1920s in the United States. And whether it was the local community church putting on their Christmas pageant, or Plymouth on its 300th anniversary putting on the pageant of Plymouth. These kinds of large community pageants were an important way in which communities came together to mark important elements of their history, or some seminal event in their community, or just as a way to try to bring the larger population and communities together.
So what was the Quincy pageant? What did that entail?
So the Quincy pageant was written by a woman named Virginia Tanner. She was I guess we could say a pretty bigwig in the community pageant movement.
Okay.
She had helped to appear and directed dance in the very first large community pageant in Thetford, Vermont, a long time ago. And she was a founding member of the American Pageant Association, even. But Virginia Tanner had been the assistant director in Plymouth and written pageants for communities such as Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Albany, New York, amongst others. So she came here, created the pageant, and the pageant was a series of 3 major acts, each with 3 scenes, that began with Thomas Morton and the origin stories of the community in the first European settlement, and stretched all the way through until the Civil War.
Okay, so we're talking live theater.
Yes, we are talking live theater. The advertisement here says a cast of 1,500.
Yeah.
All the words we have say it was probably more like 1,200, but 1,200 community participants in the pageant, with an actual chorus of 500 singers to provide song as a part of the interludes for each one of the different scenes.
Yes, and I'm guessing it was at Pageant Field?
It was indeed, and that's exactly how Pageant Field got its name.
Okay.
At the time, people would refer to it in 1925 as the lower fields of Marymount Park.
Oh, interesting, okay.
But after this event, it would become known as Pageant Field.
And were there tryouts and rehearsals for this?
Oh, absolutely. So within weeks of Virginia Tanner being hired in February of 1925, she was actively putting out advertisements, recruiting different individuals, and prominent members of the community were a part of it. Not surprisingly, the Adams family were a part of many of the stories, and several Adams descendants actually played their ancestors in the pageant itself.
Fun. So advertising the pageant, why? Was this an economical driver as well to bring money into the city?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it was?
Absolutely. So this is part of a real concerted marketing campaign to bring people from not just Massachusetts, but around the country here to Quincy to learn about Quincy's history. So a very focused marketing campaign. Again, Mr. Capon, a very well-known person in public advertising in Boston, will be hired to create this viewpoint of the church, which has been replicated many, many times since then. The view from the Hancock Cemetery out to the church is one that has been imitated many, many times.
And the trees are very large there in that depiction. Those are gone now.
Those are gone. Obviously, the landscape is a little bit different.
Right.
Flipping over and doing a little bit of shameless promotion.
Sure.
For those who are interested in potentially having their own copy of this poster, it will be for sale at Quincy's 400 headquarters.
Ah, very good.
Right here on Hancock Street.
Okay, all right. So a little memento for.
Yep, yeah, just a little memento for those folks who are looking for a little retro, reference back to 100 years ago.
Will there be a poster for Quincy 400 available at some point this year?
I think there might be.
Okay.
I think there might be, yes.
We'll look forward to that. Talk about the colors actually used in this.
So again, more of this sort of classic color palette from the 1920s here. Everything from the way in which it's sketched out, the drawing itself, the darker foreground here to allow the church to really pop out, and these sort of softer or various what you would call sort of mid-palette colors to help support the church itself. Just a classic example of that kind of commercial art from the day.
Yeah. So there was an admission fee to attend the pageant. Is that right for spectators?
Yes, absolutely. So there were tickets and ticket prices, and we can, as we move on a little here, we can actually see a blown up version of one of the tickets itself. But you could sit in individual seats, or you could buy an entire box to sit in as part of the pageant.
And is this an actual poster from that time, Bob?
This is not. Unfortunately, we don't have any. This was made from a postcard size piece that is a part of the Quincy Historical Society's collections. Another one of our important contributors to making this story known to people.
Absolutely.
So, Bob, we are standing in front of a picture of what is undoubtedly one of the most iconic images of the city of Quincy, one of the granite spheres, right?
Yes. Yep.
Little known fact that I just learned actually is that it was gifted to the city during the Quincy 300 celebration.
Yes, it was on Friday afternoon of the week. This was sort of the warm-up act to the fireworks and concert that were going to happen on Friday night at Pageant Field. The Granite Workers Association, or Granite Manufacturers Association technically, gifted this massive sphere, 6 foot in diameter, to the city of Quincy, and it was dedicated here. It will be followed by a big luncheon that happened down at the Dorothy Quincy Homestead, actually.
Of course, the granite industry was huge in Quincy at that time, right? So this was a way for the city to say, hey, don't forget about us, right?
Well, and also to mark that legacy.
Yeah.
I think if we're talking about the realities of the industry in the 1920s, steel has really taken over as the preeminent building material, and it would not be too much longer that the industry would really survive and thrive here in Quincy. So this is really in many ways sort of a last big celebration and a really important lasting recognition of the importance of the industry here in the community, if we're looking back on it, from today.
Talk a little bit about the creation of this actual sphere.
So this sphere came from Swingle's Quarry, one of the larger quarries that's up in the Quincy Quarries Reservation. And Arthur Swingle was an important member of the Manufacturers Association. I don't want to steal too much thunder from the Quincy Granite guys, Mr. Bina and Mr. Bonomi, but it came from there. It had to be roughed out into the sphere shape, and then would be brought to this building here on Water Street to be turned and to be polished to create the 6 foot sphere that we have today, right outside our window here in front of both Old City Hall and New City Hall.
Is this the same sphere?
This is the same sphere.
The same sphere.
Yes.
And talk about the actual dedication ceremony. How did that happen?
Okay, well, so Mr. Swingle's daughter, Maxine, would be the official puller of the string to unveil it. And it would include obviously various speeches by the dignitaries, the mayor, various members of the Granite Workers Associations and Manufacturers Associations, and dedicated here amidst, as you can see, quite a bit of fanfare.
Yes, yes. It is, let's see, to reading the statistics, it's 6 feet in diameter and weighs 11 tons.
It weighs 11 tons, yes.
How did it get there, Bob? How did they move something like this?
Good question.
Yeah.
So they moved it in the same way that they had moved granite for years. So they're using simple machines, the kinds of things we learn about in elementary school science, actually. So usually fixed posts, ropes, and pulleys are the ways that they lift and move these things. Now, by this time, they do have, of course, steam power and others to use for actually moving this particular piece. But in a traditional stone shed during this time period, if you went down to Center Street in West Quincy, you would find all kinds of the same equipment in similar use that had been used even 100 years before that to lift and to move granite.
Are there other granite spheres in existence?
Well, there is one in Wollaston Cemetery, in Mount Wollaston Cemetery, for Theophilus King. And there is a third, and I wish I could say right now exactly where it is. The last I knew, I believe, was in Rochester, New York. But again, that will be something for Al and Tom to maybe let you know about in terms of its exact location these days.
Right. Is the third one, though, also Quincy granite, do you know?
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, all right. Well, see, maybe some questions will come up from this exhibit that would lead to more research.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm sure Al or Tom, as soon as they see this, will immediately call me up and say, you should know that it's actually from wherever it is actually from.
Well, for folks who aren't aware, the men you're speaking about run the Quincy Quarry and Granite Workers Museum. There's an actual museum up off Verschutti Drive in West Quincy.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't provide that context. I work with them so often that I sort of have this colloquial version of them as the granite guys. But they have an amazing collection of Quincy's granite history and one of the last remaining manufacturing in the ruins of one of the last manufacturing buildings here in the city. Yes, the Lion Starting Mill.
Absolutely. So when folks look at the granite sphere that's existing outside of City Hall today, they're looking at the same one that was dedicated for the Quincy 300 celebration.
Yes, indeed. And when they come to view it here in City Hall, they would be looking out the window where it would have been if they had come to City Hall back in 1925.
Very good. So you've really put a lot of thought into the way this exhibit is laid out.
Well, we try to when we can.
Sure. Thanks for sharing information about that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So a big part of the Quincy 300 celebration back in 1925 was a 3-mile-long parade featuring something like 182 floats, including about 10,000 participants and 140,000 plus spectators. So, Bob, that was quite a party.
It was, and it really, truly was the big deal of the celebrations in many ways.
Absolutely.
There were police officers from numerous communities who came to assist. Every single police officer and many of the local older Boy Scouts who would be deputized to help provide public safety during the parade. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier, but one of the remarkable things about this entire week is that there were almost no major incidents or problems at any of the programs. They had the luck of perfect weather, but from a public safety point of view, there's really literally no incidents or accidents of any kind during the course of the entire week. And I think that's a real testament to the level of effort that local community leaders, and in particular the local police, put into making sure that this was going to be a safe event for a lot of people here in the community.
Yes. So the parade, tell me about the parade. Was there a theme? Was there a grand marshal? Was it the same route that we know of today along Hancock Street?
It was a little bit different in terms of a route. So the route actually stretched from North Quincy. So if you know where Squantum Street passes or intersects with Hancock Street, that was the kickoff place. And the parade had actually 5 different sections to it. A military, a civil, all kinds of various elements. And each section, the parade had contests. So for those who built floats, there was a first, second, and third prize, and then there were these separate special categories that you could win awards for, and those awards obviously highly coveted in the context of this this parade. The parade physically being 3 miles long, if everybody in the parade was in the parade, the folks who stepped off the parade at the beginning would be just ending as the last group of people in the parade were starting.
Right.
And at 3 miles long, it took basically 3 hours for the entire parade to pass any one area along the route. So it was moving at about a mile an hour.
Okay, all right. And where did it end?
So it ended right up here where you may know sort of where the Firestone Tires and Christ Church is today.
Okay.
And they ended there because at the time, what is now Firestone was a large Ford dealership. And the Ford dealership had offered to provide food for the officers and the dignitaries who were marching in the parade. All of the regular foot soldiers in particular who were part of the parade, they moved on to a field nearby to also have some food afterwards.
Okay.
So that area was chosen because it was physically an easy area for large groups of marchers to disperse throughout the community.
Sure. And was there a Grand Marshal for that parade?
There was, and then Grand Marshal was the leader of the parade itself.
Okay.
And I'll let folks come and they can investigate and see who actually participated in the parade.
Yes.
And they can read about him and more about the awards and other things. That
Oh,
came
okay, a
along
little
with it.
teaser.
Yeah, a little teaser.
Don't give away too
We'll leave it
much.
as a teaser.
All
yeah.
right. The floats themselves, is it like we know today? Was it community groups that built the floats for the parade?
Yes, and the idea here was very early on, one of the initial communications from the organizing committees was to invite all of the community organizations, schools, everybody who was a part of any kind of organized community or organization. It could be a religious group, it could be a community group of Italians, for example, or something like that.
Garden
to
club,
participate.
perhaps, or something.
Yes, to participate in the ceremonies. And obviously the parade is one of those pieces where, the local yacht clubs, of course, are providing us a float. All kinds of the Boy Scout troops, every single one of the 21 schools here in Quincy had a float, that kind of thing.
And local businesses as well?
Local businesses as well, yes.
Okay.
Yep, and one of them actually is right behind us here.
Yes.
So this float is a replica of the first USS Lexington, which was being finished at the Fore River Shipyard at the time. And the shipyard would present this particular float as a part of their contributions to the community, and not surprisingly, given that it has steam floating out of it, amongst other things, would be one of the award winners.
It was.
For the parade, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. One of the other things I like about this particular picture is it's one of the few images that we have of the parade that doesn't come right from Quincy Center. So one of the few shots you can see where you get a sense of what Hancock Street might have looked like in 1925.
Yeah, it looks
So-
very residential, actually.
Yep. And I mean, you can see the rows of people 2 and 3 deep in this area, but not quite as crowded as where some of the other areas that people congregated in, particularly around Quincy Center.
Right. And was there just one parade for the Quincy 300?
There was just one parade. Yep, because the celebration was just that week in
Yes.
June, from the 7th to the 13th.
Yeah.
So just one big parade.
Interestingly, 1925, there were still some veterans of the Civil War available, right?
Yes, there were, and they would march 2 of the 3 miles
Wow.
of the parade before they stopped in Quincy Center and would. It's actually probably a little bit longer than that, but they stopped in Quincy Center and would be honored in the main grandstand that was right in front of Hancock Cemetery. We brought there and they sat with all the state dignitaries and others.
Absolutely, yeah, interesting. So what is it that you would like folks to kind of take away from this exhibit, Bob, when they come here to the old town hall, as it were, and enjoy this exhibit that's going to be here, for a good part of the year anyway, right?
Yes, well, it will be here at minimum for the next 2 months, and maybe here a little bit longer. It has been designed as a traveling exhibit, so it will also be heading out to various branches of the Thomas Crane Library over the course of the year. But I hope what folks are able to take away from this is just a little bit of what life was like in 1925, and how people in Quincy came together to celebrate this community that they lived in with one another, and the ways in which they did that.
And is this kind of a self-guided exhibit that folks will come in and just wander through, or what's the best way to enjoy it, basically?
It is a self-guided, it's designed as a self-guided experience. We will have docents who are here to answer questions and to provide extra details or other interesting facts. We are thinking about maybe If possible, we may be offering some special guided tour experience as well, while it's here in Old Town Hall.
It is free, right? for folks?
It is free. Yep.
Are there hours? Are there actual hours?
And the exhibit will be open. Thank you. That's an important piece of information. The exhibit will be open here on Thursdays and Fridays from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then the building will be open on Saturdays, which it not normally is. But the mayor's made a special effort to make sure we can have it open on a day when folks aren't working. So the exhibit will be open between noon and 5 on Saturdays as well.
Great.
And that's at minimum through January and February.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add right now?
No, just come on, invite folks to come on down and enjoy the exhibit, and we hope that they do.
Well, thanks for spending some time to show it to us, and we hope give our viewers a little preview to tease them to come on down and experience more.
Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate you coming down and talking about the exhibit with us today.
You're very welcome.